Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. And in today's episode, I'd like to answer a few common questions that I often get from listeners, including how do you know if a product has naturally occurring sugars or added sugars? And are natural sugars okay? Now, what you'll be hearing in this episode are my answers to these questions and more, and my answers are taken from a few Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives that I did in the past. So even if the answers were recorded a year or two ago, they're still relevant today. We'll get to those questions and answers in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_Life After Sugar. All right, so let's get to answering some of your questions. Here's the first one. So, how do you know when you pick up an item at the grocery store, how do you know if it has added sugars or not? If on the table, the nutrition table, it says sugar or sugars and then an amount of grams, how do you know if those sugars are added or if they're naturally occurring? Well, first thing, let's have an example of yogurt, for example, like plain yogurt. If you look in the list of ingredients first, then you'll see whether or not it has sugar or one of its 156 synonyms in the list of ingredients, and that gives you the first clue to know whether or not it's added sugars or not. And also plain yogurt with no flavorings, no vanilla, no nothing, plain yogurt doesn't usually have added sugars, but they are sneaky. The food industry is sneaky and does slip in sometimes some fillers like starches, modified cornstarch, stuff like that. You can count that as added sugars. Starch is pretty much the same as sugar once it's inside of the body, especially in powder form. But my number one tip for you is look at the list of ingredients first, before you even look at the table with the mention of carbs and sugars. The list of ingredients is the first place to look, and that is usually on the back of the packaging. And don't take any notice of all the health claims and the marketing hype on the front of the packaging. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if it looks like the product is relatively processed and tampered with by the food industry, chances are that already that should be ringing bells for you in your mind about things having been added to the product. If it's a product to begin with rather than a whole food, that is also a sign to check on the list of ingredients to see whether there's sugar or one of its synonyms in the list of ingredients. Whole foods don't have added sugars. No real whole foods have any added sugars. None. So that is also something to remember. Products may have added sugars, whole foods do not. Here's the second question. Are natural sugars okay? I get this question a lot, and I just wanted to have a quick chat with you about natural sugars and about the whole kind of concept or question about if such and such of a food or a sugar is okay. First of all, it's not so much, in my humble opinion, it's not so much the sugar or the natural sugars or the unnatural sugars that are okay or not okay, but more about how we relate to them and how much we kind of crave them or need them. So it's more like getting to a place where you are at peace with your food, including sugars. But specifically for naturally occurring sugars like lactose, like the sugars in fruits, and even vegetables, like more of the starchy vegetables, they're fine, they're not bad in and of themselves, except if we are looking to them to kind of like fill a need, or if we have this type of craving relationship with these types of sugars, where I think we need to have a closer look on how we relate to these sugars and these foods rather than look at the foods themselves. But the good news is that naturally occurring sugars, like the fructose and the glucose in fruits, like the lactose in dairy products, they come with a whole load of other nutrients. So they're whole foods. So you eat them more slowly when they're in their whole form. They're not juiced, they're not pureed, they're not liquidized. With dairy, I ferment my dairy so that there is less lactose, but there's also more probiotics. So you've got a whole host of other good nutrients. The problem with added sugars or industrially processed sugars that I kind of suggest we all keep away from is that they have zero nutritional value. So really, what's the point of eating them? Now, you could say the point of eating them is that they taste good and they provide, pleasure in life, which is not to be underestimated. But, they also provide a lot of kind of backlash after the fact. You feel guilty, you may feel bloated, you may get sick and fat, and so it's really not that much of a pleasure when you think about it. And it's a good idea, I think, and this is what I teach, a good idea to reevaluate our definition of food, our definition of sugar, and our definition of fun and pleasure to include real whole foods and really tasty foods rather than kind of jacked up tastes with added sugars and flavors and all these industrially processed products. So are natural sugars okay? Sure. The thing is to keep sweet tasting foods, I would say, to a minimum, so that you're not always running after sweet tastes to answer some kind of emotional need. I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews. In fact, here's one from listener Eddie Billy from August 2024. It's a 5-star review that says, "This podcast makes you think and helps you make small but crucial changes." And it continues, "I came across this excellent podcast as I delved around in a wide variety of other health-related and lifestyle podcasts about a year ago when I started clean fasting. I can't remember now if I heard Netta on Graham Curry's podcast first or if it was somewhere else, but I loved her wise words and British accent. I have now listened to Netta's whole back catalogue of Life After Sugar and I can recommend it wholeheartedly. Netta is relatable, funny and honest. She has made me realise that there are many ways to get high on life without sugar-laden goodies being consumed 24/7. I'm not seeking my thrills from a sugar-induced head rush. No, thank you. I'm not sugar-free, but have made significant reductions in my sugar intake thanks to Netta's advice and suggestions. well worth listening to this podcast. The stories we get to hear through her chats to other real-life people are my favourite. Thanks, Netta. Well, thank you for your lovely review. And when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar. All right, here's question number 3. I've reduced my sugar intake. Why am I still getting cravings? Talking about cravings today because, it's funny because your body, generally, most people's bodies get used to lower sugar faster than your memory of the sugar or the chocolate or the chips or the bread or whatever. And cravings are often the last things or one of the last things for us to kind of be liberated from, because our memory of all those good times and all those delicious foods, well, our memory of them lingers for a long time. So we're good for a while. I don't actually believe in that kind of concept of being good or bad, but let's just say, we find that we're being good and not eating those sugary, starchy foods or the junk food or whatever for a while. And then something happens, usually some kind of real life, something like an emotional event or stress, or we're exhausted or something like that, totally normal. And then our cravings come back. It's like, I've been good for weeks and months, and then suddenly something happens and, I've got to have some chocolate. I've got to have some ice cream or whatever. How can you make your cravings disappear? Well, it's that connection between your emotions and your valid emotional needs and whatever foods. It's that connection that you need to work on more deeply. And that's what Life After Sugar is all about. And that's what my program helps you with. To look behind those cravings, what's causing those cravings, and to meet whatever valid emotional needs you're having and that are making you have cravings, to meet those valid emotional needs in other ways than with those foods that you're craving, because it's like a vicious cycle. And if you're at a stage in your life where you're ready to get rid of cravings, then as I just mentioned, my program, the Freedom from Cravings Formula, could be a perfect fit for you. But there's so much confusing and contradictory information out there. How are you supposed to know what's right for you? Well, that's exactly why I created my 90-day program, the Freedom from Cravings Formula. It's a program that's specifically designed for women over 50 who want to get rid of cravings and feel more in control around food, especially sugar and comfort foods. In the program, you'll get step-by-step guidance and customized support through the 5-step formula that I've developed to help you get control over cravings so that you can finally live your life with more energy and fit into your favorite clothes effortlessly and feel confident in your food choices so that you can ditch the shame and embarrassment that you feel every time your emotions make you slip or fall off the wagon, and so that you never feel like you're on some kind of a restrictive diet. If you're at the stage of your life where you're finally ready to look after yourself, let's chat. You can hop on a free clarity call with me at any time by going to aftersugarclub.com and clicking on the big green button, Schedule a Clarity Call. We'll have a quick 30-minute one-on-one chat to see if the Freedom from Cravings Formula 90-day program is a good fit for you. So go to aftersugarclub.com. Speak soon. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.